I recently have reduced my number of videos on my YouTube channel. It was nearly 850. It's now, I think, closer to 270 something. Basically, I've removed 2 out of every 3 videos. And my reason I did that is actually a common pattern that throughout my career, throughout a variety of formats, is a great way to kind of be able to translate from inability to produce volume to experiment, to do things quickly, to try things out, and translating that into quality, where you take the top 1/3, right? The top 20%, the top 10% of something is going to be better than the other percent. That's why you pick that percent. Same thing I did when I was doing AAA level design, where for a puzzle game would design every single week 6, 12, 18 puzzles in kind of a rough draft state, to then narrow down which half of those to even show the rest of the team, to then narrow down out of those which half of those are worth taking forward. Similar pattern we had back in even high school English class, where one of the things I liked about our teacher's approach there was he would basically make us write 3 or 4 different possible rough drafts, out of which we would then narrow down which 1 or 2 we actually wanted to take forward to even a second draft, let alone a final, because it was just a way to kind of, try things out, see what fits. Quite often we can't just sit there and mean to do better work and then produce better work, because there's a lot of things we can't tell until they're kind of hanging together, till they're fit together. That's why when I did my experimental gameplay series, the 7 months of nightly prototypes, 219 experimental little daily gameplay interactive prototype things, out of which 5 of those were great, did fairly well in different metrics, helped me get into grad school, helped get me into a festival, helped pay my way to San Francisco for a while, various kind of useful ways, helped connect me to a publisher. But I couldn't have just sat down and just made just those 5. It came from doing a ton, a high volume, to then be able to pick from it what was highest value. One of my first ebooks, and certainly my first of a textbook length, separate from my actual textbook, Hands-On Intro to Game Programming. The other one was Video Game Developer Strategy Guide, and what that came from, it was, at the time I was blogging, it was called hobbygamedev.com. That blog is now down, but during that time, every single week on average, I would write 1 article about game development. And after I'd produced just years of those weekly articles as content, I went back and I hand-selected the top 50 or so in terms of what people had been reading, in terms of what people had been sharing, what people had been commenting on, what people had thoughts about. And again, there's no shortcut to that better bit of content. One of the marketing guys who presented to a group of us when we were new at a bigger company would talk about how a number of the companies that are best known for having a really high quality bar, for producing a really high quality of work, part of what they're often doing is that they only finish maybe 20, 30, 40% of the projects that they sort of initially begin exploring. Most of their stuff winds up never going forward. And that was something which, he was just talking about kind of trade-offs that they make as to what that looks like. But it means that to the outside world, they only seem like they really know what they're doing. Like they only produce really high caliber stuff. That's controlled, right? Often we talk about NDAs and not being able to talk about what we're working on at companies. It's not just about hiding the secret sauce, the secret processes, the, patented methods or something. It's much more about hiding the mess, not showing the things that are indecisive, influx, might get canceled, because when I say, these companies only release a small percentage of what they start, I'm not talking about the stuff that's really high profile, like some cases you see where they are promoting it for a while and telling the customers about it and they yank it out and say, we're not going to do that. I'm talking about stuff that never sees light of day at all, where in many cases those employees, at best, you see some sort of references in their resumes to what they even worked on because it was truly sealed in and you only saw the highest quality caliber of stuff. So anyway, part of why I do that, of course, is that after any given one of my videos, people get randomly recommended other videos on my channel. And so by reducing by 2/3 some of my content that was people didn't respond as naturally to or something, and I don't regret putting those messages out there or trying those things out or trying those thoughts, but a lot of those cases, some cases were outdated, some cases were connected to my older branding. So back when it was called, say, Gamketo Club rather than Home Team Game Dev. But a lot of those too were things where I was just sort of trying out an idea to figure out, does this have legs? In some cases, it did. And what that means by have legs is that it's worth taking forward. It's worth developing past that rough draft. It's worth taking beyond sort of, improvising a bit, sort of chatting about it, developing something real. And that's where it became a part of my content at, for example, Self-Command, our productivity audiobook and the methods in there. A lot of that grew from things where first I would do a ton of videos on here daily for several large spans of time, as some of y'all know, to try some things out, figure out which of those are resonating with people, because you can't really tell sometimes until you're trying to put it into action, until you're trying to convey it to others. Or in other cases, I've taken those same messages and worked that stuff into my weekly email, Game Dev Tips, which of course is gamedevtraining.com. And those are things where, again, it started in many cases as just working with people, seeing patterns and things that come up with people that I train. But then even there's an extra layer of, okay, well, which parts of those generalize beyond those contexts, or only people who are in home team and have access to our resources and training and support and so on. And so there's an extra layer of testing, of experimentation. I bring all this up today to basically try to encourage a couple ways of thinking about when you're doing stuff. One is, you've heard this theme from me before, the brain's a bad emulator. It's hard to tell until you've tried something sometimes. And that as part of that, it is basically to take the pressure off of yourself to feel like it has to be perfect the first time it comes out, or it's not worth doing. That in many cases, that's part of the exercise of the only way forward to find out what's worth doing is to start trying some things. And then secondarily is to recognize the value of subtractive effort, of taking time, not just to add more content, not just to do more things, but to take some time and go back and trim some, to take some time and figure out what's the top 10, 20, 30, maybe even 50% of something that you've done. And if you can forefront that, if you can highlight that, if you can even maybe occasionally put some of the rest of the stuff off in archive, it can improve the overall sort of effect and increase the odds that somebody's going to randomly stumble into something that's of high value to them. But that's it for the day. Thanks for tuning in and following along. Like I mentioned, of course, Self-Command, our productivity audiobook. That's where a lot of the messages from my old 2/3 of videos that really had a great point worth saving, but maybe weren't best positioned as random old channel video buried among hundreds of my other videos. Or, of course, gamedevtraining.com, the weekly email list. That's been going great. That's also, by the way, set up in a way that you're not missing anything. It's set up on a queue system. So whenever you sign up, you'll get email 1, a week later email 2, a week later email 3. So it's not as if you are months behind if you sort of didn't sign up when this was first announced. Each one I'm authoring, I'm putting into a queue, so you'll still get the full series of information if you join today at gamedevtraining.com. Thanks for following along. I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.